Consider the following scenario. Acton and neighboring towns vote to be a sanctuary city, but face defunding from federal agencies. How do you handle this situation? So we'll start right here, President Ryan.
As somebody who supports the Safe Communities Act, I think that we need to put pressure on our legislators to push through this legislation so we don't have to worry about funding being cut within our local towns and communities because of that. Thank you.
Ben is absolutely right on this one. We need statewide solutions. Massachusetts needs to become a sanctuary state. And the truth of the matter is that this fear of the federal government cutting funds is just actual fear. There are also lawsuits in place to stop this. Our towns should not fear of doing what is right and protecting people in need.
I agree with what's already been said, and in addition to the lawsuits, it's actually been actual court decisions that have pointed to this. So and I agree that we need state solutions for some of these problems, but we already do have, as was already noted, a sanctuary status in the town of Acton, and we're not facing any cuts to federal funds.
Ditto to all that, and as well, I would like to point out that this will all get way, way easier to combat if we end up getting a Democrat as a governor. So we all need to work hard for that, so that way we don't have Charlie Baker going and trying to give our police forces away. You want to go back around? Okay.
What is your vision of what local suburban public transportation could look like?
Oh man, I'm excited about the future. So right now, we've got a problem that everything's based on trains that are under grading systems. I think the first thing we need to do is go and upgrade those systems, make sure that trains aren't running 15 minutes behind on a day with the tiniest bit of drizzle. This happened to me a few weeks back. And also, I think we need to look into the new technologies and innovations that are coming out. Tesla's coming out with all sorts of cool stuff. And if we could have publicly funded automated cars, say 20 years from now, that go and pick people up who need public transportation but can't get to those things, that would be a fantastic benefit. And we need to look towards those new solutions.
I agree. I think it's important that we look to alternatives. I also think it's really important that we take a look at smart growth policies that actually support economies and housing within an area, so that we're not constantly having to think about how do we get cars from Acton to Boston and an hour away. How do we get people from Springfield all the way to Boston? What we should be doing is focusing on supporting communities, creating investments to support communities so that they're self-sustaining. So smart growth is, I think, one thing that we ought to be taking a harder look at.
One of the things that I want to say about public transportation is that it's too expensive. We have people here who have to deal with the traffic and the rotary and the cars, while our public transportation costs $10 each way to get into Boston. Public transportation should be green and it should be free, and the funding exists for that. We have a climate crisis. We need to get the cars off the roads fast, and public transportation should 100% be free. This can be funded, paid at the state level by ending corporate subsidies, by shifting the tax burden to polluters, to high-end consumers, and it should also be paid for at the federal level by cutting the federal military budget by at least 50% to transform to a green and peace-based economy.
So in terms of transportation, I think we need to be aware that there is a $7.2 billion backlog in state of good repair projects. What we need to do is to invest more in our transportation, in our capital system, in order to reduce that state of good repair backlog and bring up our reliability on the system. That can be done through the support of the Fair Share Tax Amendment, which I support, and I urge all of you folks to vote in November in support of too. Thank you.
What will you do to fight income inequity in Massachusetts?
In terms of income inequality, this past fall and summer I was out canvassing for Fight for 15 and paid family medical leave. I believe that these two initiatives are the start to help fighting income inequality. I also believe in transit-oriented development, because once you get people out of cars and get them on transit, they can actually get into Boston, get the jobs that they need, and work and put food on their tables. So again, fight for 15 paid family medical leave and investing in transit-oriented development, which gets people into Boston. Thank you.
It's going to happen. One of these days, we're going to hear that some state in the United States has abolished poverty. And the question is, will it be Massachusetts? There is no reason that we can't abolish poverty. The fight for 15 is a great idea, but it's not enough. $15 an hour is not a living wage. We need to move toward guaranteed living income. That's the wave of the future. In addition to that, we need a graduated income tax, and we need an economic Bill of Rights that needs to be passed that says that every single person has a constitutional right to healthy food, clean water, affordable housing, and single-payer health care.
I think the issue of income inequality is a very difficult issue to tackle. And I think that in order to tackle it, we have to have both short-term and long-term solutions. We need to be looking at this for multiple years and not just in the short term. So with that, and thinking about the long term, I think it's critical that we make investments in our education system. And I also support the millionaire's tax because it will support investments in education as well as transportation, which we already covered. I think the other thing that's really important is that we also have real conversations about gender pay gaps and also income inequality among people of color and Latinos. Because I'm a single parent, and when you get divorced, oftentimes your income, because you're supporting two houses, decreases dramatically. And as a single parent, as a single mom, I know what it means to try to put food on the table every single day, knowing that I am paid less than people I work with. And I know this for a fact because I've seen the budget, so I know what my male colleagues make. And I've been in conversation with the leadership of my organization, but it is real and it exists, and I've experienced it. And I live in this town, I live in Acton, which we know is an expensive town to live in. And so I've experienced it firsthand. I've also experienced firsthand what does it mean to not have health insurance. And over the past several years, I've experienced that. I've experienced not having dental insurance, and what does that mean for families who are struggling to put food on the table. So I think it's not just we need to invest in jobs, or we need to pass policies to support people earning a living wage. I agree with those and I support those, absolutely. But I think we also have to have some of the other conversations that also filter into the issues around income inequality, because it's not just one type of person or one demographic that's affected.
Income inequality is an emergent problem. It's a problem that stems from a bunch of different sources that all kind of pool together and form into this river of nastiness. And as someone who is gay, I'm lucky I don't have to deal with family planning very much. When I have a family, it's going to be very, very planned. But for many, many people, access to things like family planning and Planned Parenthood, as well as various health resources that would be provided by things like single payer, would do a whole lot in order to make these big expenses that can be unexpected and that can make real big differences in someone's life less painful. I didn't have insurance for the majority of last year, and man, was that bad. I have ADD and dyslexia, and not having access to my ADD medication, for example, made it very, very difficult for me to focus on doing the paperwork that would allow me to get insurance, because it is an incredibly complex system, and if you miss a date, you're pretty much hosed for a while. So we need to make sure that the systems are accessible, that they're easy to explain, and that they are adequately addressing the problems that we're encountering.
In your opinion, why do we need more female officials or candidates?
I thought it said how would yeah.
No, it just said, why do we need more? Oh, that's a good question. That would be interesting. Okay, well, please just stay with us as much as you can. I mean, I know it's been a long program, but I really appreciate you being here. You know, a couple more minutes, and then I'll just give an individual wrap-up, okay? Thank you.
There are lots of issues intrinsic to being a woman that I simply am completely unequipped to answer intuitively. And so we need those female voices there to make it so that way they can make sure that their voices are heard, that their perspectives are listened to. For example, I went to the Citizens Legislative Seminar this past October. And when I was there, a woman who was, the bill that we were looking at, you know, in our moot Senate, was, I believe, the paid family leave. And she was a pregnant spouse of a soldier. And she was saying that the limits on when the benefits would be applied needed to have an exception for spouses of soldiers, so that way women who were pregnant could get their leave and have their child even if they were recently moved with the military. That's the type of perspective that if she wasn't in that room talking to one of the senators working on it, would not have made it into the bill. So we need to have women in the room, in the seats, making votes, making those voices.
I think that's exactly right. Sort of the way that I think about this and the way I sort of live my life is, you know, women are the backbones of our families and our communities. We engage in volunteer work. We are, you know, working in service to others oftentimes. We're oftentimes in service industry type of work, teaching, nursing, so we're in giving fields. So we see a lot of the human suffering that's happening. We see it firsthand in our volunteer work and in our families, and also in the work that we do. And so I think it's just really important, like you said, Christian, to have female voices, because there is a different perspective that gets brought up. I also think that there's a different way that women oftentimes lead. I see a lot of collaboration, and that's some of the things that people have come up to me and said in terms of the Women's March, in relation to the Women's March, that the movements in the 60s and the 70s, but primarily in the 60s, were so oftentimes led by men, and there was a lot of infighting and a lot of sort of back and forth that it actually prevented some of the work from getting done. And so what people have told me is that they appreciate the deep engagement of women and women leading the resistance movements now, because we lead in a different way, that things are collaborative and we're rolling up our sleeves and we're just getting it done. We're not worried about some of the things that has been reported to me that have come up. I clearly wasn't around in the 60s, so I don't know, so this is, you know, secondary hand, but so I think there's a different way that women lead, and I think there's different voices that and perspectives that get shared.
You know, I think it's sad that we even have to ask the question why we need more women in our legislature. I don't think anyone would have the chutzpah to ask a question why we might need more African Americans in the legislature, for example. So the fact that such a question even has to be asked, I think says something about our education system. I think that when we all grow up, when we're kids, you know, this is where our perceptions in regard to sexism are formed. And what I feel Massachusetts has to move towards is reforming our public schools to actually prepare our youth to live in a democracy where the message goes forth that every single person matters. And also, yes, where decisions are made not through an adversary system, but through cooperation, through fairness, for respect for all people's views. We need to take some of the approaches from women's groups and engage in the teaching of cooperation, collaboration, and peacemaking rather than adversarial approaches. And until we do that, until we reform our education, we're still going to be getting a lot of questions like, why should we have social justice in the first place?
I'm going to take this from a different perspective, and I'm going to keep it very simple. The reason why we need more women legislators, whether it's in the House or the Senate, the governor's office, or going all the way up to the upper echelons in the government, is we need to combat the Trump effect that's taking place, period. What is coming out of the White House, what is coming out of our federal government is unacceptable. And by having more women who are elected into office, that shows our children that, hey, look, what's taking place up in Washington, D.C. right now, what is going on with the president is unacceptable. Here is somebody that you can look towards as inspiration and as a way to make change within our country.
And I'm very, very glad to be here and running and representing quite a few communities, actually. Young Democrats, gay Democrats, disabled, learning disabled. I'm actually really, really glad at the amount of support I've seen from so many communities across Massachusetts, and particularly in this district, where we are really, really starving for young people who want to get involved and become part of the process. And what I'm happy to report is that there are a bunch of unenrolled people my age who are equally starving to get involved and to see change. And if we can just go out to them and explain to them what it is they can do, what it is they can achieve within the Democrats, then we will get those young people involved. We will get them excited. And I think a big part of that is showing them that they can go and run and be treated respectfully and be seen as actual contenders and perhaps maybe even victors. And I'm really looking forward to being able to serve all of you, and I hope to hear some more of your questions after. So thank you.
Once again, I just want to thank Sal and everybody else for pulling together such an amazing event this morning. This is a very important campaign coming up. This is the first time in 20 years that this seat has been open. And when you're looking towards September and casting your vote, I'm asking you to cast your vote for me because I am the candidate with 20 years of direct government work experience. So join me in my campaign. Come and support my organization, and it would be wonderful to get any one of us up at Beacon Health. But once again, come out, vote, get out there, and thank you very much, and go Patriots.
I want to thank everyone, especially my fellow candidates. Just wonderful to hear from all of you. We heard about so many issues today. I don't think we heard enough about what is our most existential crisis, which is climate change, which is ultimately our greatest threat. I can't emphasize enough how much we have to work together to put together an emergency plan to halt climate change, and how the same legislation can create hundreds of thousands of green, safe, living wage jobs in Massachusetts. We can be 100% fossil fuel free and end poverty all by 2030. But we have to put our minds to it, and it can't be done in a logjam system with one-party rule with 80% of the state legislatures all with one party. I have so much respect for all these candidates, and I know that they mean the best, but it comes down to how we're going to pass the legislation and get solutions. And something sort of magical in a bad way seems to happen right before the legislation is about to pass. And that's where the money and the powers that be and the corporations get to have their say more than anybody else in their room. So I hope that you will support this independent campaign from outside of the two-party system. I think we need to do something different. Again, I respect the platforms of my opponents, but in the end, is legislation going to be passed that will be bold enough to save your job, save your life, or save the planet? Please think about that, because I think we can do much better in our political system. So I ask you to select an independent voice as your representative, and I ask for your vote in November. It is truly in our hands. Thank you so much for giving me the honor of being here today, and thank you for holding this event.
thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Sal, for pulling this together with Laura. A couple things that I want to touch on in my closing is that I am a public health social worker by training, and the way I sort of view the world is exactly how I responded to one of the earlier questions, which is we need to have both the short-term and the long-term view. And I think right now we're so caught up in the crisis of the day, and we're so caught up in investing or spending our money in crisis services. If you think about the way that we spend our healthcare dollars, only 4% goes to prevention, 96% goes to urgent services, taking care of people who are, very sick. That is preventable. And so what I parlay that to is that we actually have an abundance of resources at our disposal. We are just not making the right choices and the right decisions and the right investments to make sure that we have a playing field for everybody, that everybody has equal opportunity to achieve their fullest potential. And we have an abundance of resources that we could really be doing some of the things that Danny was talking about in terms of renewable energy sources or transportation or making investments in, civic engagement. So that's what I would bring to the State House, and that's why I ask for your support, because I will be up there fighting for both what we need to do to take care of the here and now and what we need to do to make sure that we're really planning for multiple generations to come. So I hope to earn your support. I look forward to talking with you and meeting with you, and thank you again for all your time.